Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're all well and in good form. So this is about anxiety. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation about it. You know that I do a lot of work around anxiety, but there's this reoccurring theme that keeps coming up constantly at the moment. And it's happening in session and it's happening with the therapists that we train on anxiety. And the reason for this video is that if you're suffering from anxiety or if you're working with anxiety, I'm hoping that the differentiation of what I'm about to show you will help. That this small snippet of conversation maybe might be a rant at some stage, might be helpful to what you're experiencing or what you're working with. So you can hear my wee new pup running around there. You'll have to forgive her, she's only new. So anxiety. We all know that something causes anxiety. I mean, you've heard me talk about that today. I'm blue in the face, the idea of root cause of anxiety. There's a threat in the body and the body produces these sets of symptoms depending on where you are on the anxiety scale, whether you're hypo or hyperarousal, whether you're in panic or whether you're in shutdown, it doesn't matter. The physical symptoms that come from that threat can be severe. Now what happens is long after the threat goes, so long after the original threat goes, long after the original problem showed up, long after the original trigger shows up, we can be left with this experience of anxiety that terrifies us. Now that's the differentiation. The experience of anxiety that terrifies us. The experience of the disassociation, the experience of feeling like you're sucked into a black hole, the feeling of not being able to get out, the feeling of drowning that comes with hypoarousal, the feeling of sheer and utter losing your mind that comes with hyperarousal, the specific sensations that happen inside anxiety, the way that the heat, the way that the tingling runs through your body, the way that you get pins and needles in your head, it's all so unique and specific to each and every individual. But what often happens if we've had a panic attack, a hypo or hyperarousal attack, what often happens is that we then become hypervigilant about the symptoms. Not the threat that caused it, but the actual physical symptoms themselves. And we become really, really hypervigilant, switched on every day, looking for each one of those physical symptoms, afraid of those physical symptoms. And in essence, what starts to happen is that we become afraid of our physical body. We become afraid of what our bodies can do. We become afraid of what our minds can do. We become afraid of ourselves. The threat is now no longer outside ourselves. The threat is now internal. And that is an horrific place to be. So when people are talking about anxiety, when people are sharing anxiety stories, when we're working with anxiety, when we're feeling anxiety, it's really important to differentiate what we're talking about. We're talking about a threat, or we're talking about the physical symptoms that we're now afraid of. There are so many people, I was going to say in our country, but in this world, that are petrified of their own physical bodies today. The pandemic has caused that. That old wounds, they've rubbed up against old difficulties in themselves, they've rubbed up against old patterns of feelings that have been long set in the past. And the pandemic has ignited all of this stuff, and people don't know what to do or where to go with this stuff. And in that, there's these hypo or hyperarousals, these shutdown responses or these panicked responses. And if we allow anxiety to continue in our bodies, the longer the relationship that we have with those physical symptoms are, the more difficult that relationship is with those physical symptoms, the more petrifying, and the more we shrink our world, we shrink our understanding of ourselves, but we shrink our world, we shrink our experience of this world in order to be able to cope with these physical symptoms. And that's when we see, children not being able to go to school. That's when we see people not being able to come out of their house. It's often the very extreme ends that I'm talking about there, but also there's a lot of people that are walking around every single day, trying to keep themselves away from their own physical symptoms, petrified. So the purpose of this video really is to draw attention to that. To draw attention to sometimes when we're working anxiety, It's the fear of the physical symptoms, it's the fear of the body, it's the fear of the way the mind works, it's the fear of all of that that's more terrifying than the original trigger was. And when we can spot that in ourselves, when we can see that in ourselves, then we can reach forward and say to our therapist, or if you're the therapist yourself, you can understand the differentiation between that. Is look, I'm so passionate about it because I've experienced it and I know it, and I see it in clinical practice, and we teach therapists this, and the feedback that we get is incredible. See, when you spot that, see when you know what you're dealing with, then you can help it, you can alleviate it. But when you don't know what you're dealing with, when you don't know if it's the fear of the fear or the reason for the fear, when you don't know what you're dealing with, you run in circles. And you run in circles and you build this really difficult relationship with anxiety up that you're afraid that you can never get out of. So in some way, I'm hoping that this small video is a helpful piece of differentiation. It's a helpful piece of understanding the difference between, am I afraid of the physical symptoms, or am I afraid of being triggered again? Am I afraid of what's coming? Am I afraid of the threat that's outside me? Or is it both? And are you dealing with both of that every day? But now you'll have the language to describe it. Now you'll have the language to work with. Now you'll have the at least beginning of understanding of it. And it makes a difference. It moves the dial. If you are experiencing anxiety and you can resonate with some of that stuff, then now you know the language around that is the fear of your body, the fear of the symptoms. That's easy got at. That's easy worked with. That's easy de-escalated. That's easily switched off, as I will call it in our model. And now you have the vocabulary to take that to your therapist. If you're a therapist, then you know what you're dealing with when it comes your way. And all that we can do is really teach each other what we know, support each other in helping each other, which is exactly what these videos are about. If this was helpful, let me know below. If there's any more information that you need, anything else you'd like me to talk around anxiety. I mean, I could fill up the airwaves with the talk of anxiety, but this just really struck me that I would like to reach out and speak to this today, because I've been seeing it constantly, both in clinical practice and both in our training practice. So hopefully that helps today. Have a lovely day. Hence the eyes, the tired eyes and the fuzzy hair. I am on retreat in California again this week. So this is kind of in the morning for me. So I will see you all very soon and be popping in again with some more videos. We've loads of masterclasses and all coming up, and free workshops and all that coming up, so keep an eye on the page, and hopefully this was helpful. Chat to you all soon. Bye for now.